everyone. This is Amay. Basically, works at Incred Private Equity, which is a 500 crore sector agnostic fund. I know Amay since last 10-15 years, I think.
Yeah, done that.
Probably more. He's a school friend of mine, and he has previously worked as at big four companies and then moved into a private equity fund. How many years has it been in this industry?
Close to 4 years. So previously, I was working with PwC and EY's investment banking practices.
Yeah. So I think since you are like one of the very few people in the team, right? Three-man team or four-man team,
Yeah,
right?
three
So I
banking.
think you would have like great insights for us. So which is why we have like asked Dhamma and invited him for this podcast. So in this podcast, we'll more or less see what startups emerged from
Mhm.
what trend. Specifically focusing on pre-COVID, which is like 2010 to 2020, and then post-COVID, what has changed, what happened to the consumer trends, what happened to the businesses, and basically what kind of startups that emerged out of it and who remained as it is, right? So without without like taking much of time, let's start this, right?
Yeah.
So uh, just on what I believe is that in pre-COVID area, everyone like uh, it all started with the internet, right, and e-commerce boom, which started from West and everything had got adopted in India. So, what do you think specifically between 2010 to 2020? What has enabled everything? What changes did in not in the consumer trends, but also in terms of infrastructure change, which helped everything come into play.
You're absolutely right, Pratyush. So, especially before COVID, in 2015 to 2020, a lot of things came together all at once, which enabled an ecosystem for online businesses to grow. So, when I'm talking about online businesses, they can be anything from a retailer wanting to sell online and to a brand wanting to sell online, right? So,
Mm,
Amazon, Flipkart were already operating in India in the early 2010s, and it had been quite some time. If you're talking about a 2015 2016 year, they were already
mm,
operating for close to 10 years in India, and people had gotten used to purchasing things online. They had developed that trust. Initially, the trust wasn't there, right? People were hesitant. It started with books and then electronics and then all the other stuff. So
mm,
in 2015, I would say a lot of, I think, 5 6 things came together to enable this ecosystem. First was the internet. So before Geo came, so Geo launched in India in 2015, late 2015, I think September 2015, and when when they came, they completely transformed the telecom industry. Not only that, they transformed everything and anything related to internet and how people use, consumers use internet. Right before, you would count how many MBs of data you are using. All the data plans were, limited plans with, skew towards talk time rather than data, right? But post geo, they completely changed. So basically, they induce a kind of behavior in consumers where you were then not thinking about how much data you were consuming. It was more of a commodity item then. Talk time was over. It was unlimited talk time, right? So it changed the way you use your phone. It changed the way you use anything on the internet, the way you use apps, the way you consume media, and obviously it changed the way you shop also, right? Because
mm,
now there was no cost or a marginal cost associated to using an app or using a website on your phone, and enabled convenience and obviously ease of use. If you're targeting consumers who may want to buy things online, so internet was one thing. Second
mm,
thing was logistics. So delivery is a very big, I think one of the biggest logistics players focusing on the e-commerce market right now. It's listed. It's one of the first players in its space, in its niche space to get listed, and it got started in the early 2010s, right? And they started building,
2010s.
yeah, before
Oh,
2010. So they built a lot of the infrastructure. Like obviously started much before that, but they built a lot of the infrastructure, the DCs, the fulfillment centers, the machine sorting centers, and everything. they bought a lot of that machinery, as I heard in the market in the tens in 2010s early, and there were a lot of competitors like Ecom Express, or Shadowfax, Express Bees. So there are like 4 5 big players right now who specifically focus on e-commerce deliveries. That entails the
Right.
first mile, picking up the parcel, the mid mile, transporting the parcel between cities, between regions, and the last mile, getting it to your doorstep. So warehouses is also something that came together around 2015, 2016, where the cost of delivering a parcel of a certain size, let's call it a small parcel, the way these guys different classify the parcels is under a certain weight, which is
Hmm.
approximately below 5 kilo, below 4 kilo. That would entail 80% of e-commerce parcels typically. Books, from books to to phones to everything, right? Which you would usually buy
Right.
to clothes, or so the cost per item to deliver anything was coming lower, was coming down. The availability was there, so these guys were then targeting D2C brands also. They were trying to
Hmm.
onboard those D2C brands. Brands do that specifically focus on selling from on marketplaces and on their own websites or on their own apps, right? So logistics was coming there, warehousing was coming there. These were also supported by uh, various other tools, which also became mature at just at the right time around 2015, 2016, like the website platform where you can make your own website using Shopify. So Shopify started in 2008, 2009, I think, in Canada, and they scaled up, quite fast by 2011, 12. They were at a sizable scale in the US and in the Western Hemisphere. They entered India in 2013, I think. And post that, I think, no, 2015, 2016, all these things came together. So it became really easy for anyone, whether it be a retailer, small time retailer, or a small business owner, or a small brand, to just make their own website, make their online shop front, and start selling things online. And if you want to
Correct.
sell anything online, a website is required. You require payments. So Eraser Pay, BillDesk, Just Pay, these all were also developing around the same time. UPI started in 2016. It's like a crazy
Hmm.
coincidence. All these things that enable e-commerce happened around the same time. UPI started in 2016. So it was UPI presented basically a zero MDR method of doing payments online, which was
So
really important for small businesses.
for everyone, could you just mention what MDR is?
MDR is merchant discount rate. Basically, if you're making any kind of transaction online through Razorpay, for example, if you're buying anything, they process a transaction and there is a fee that gets levied on the merchant, and basically it gets passed on to you as a consumer. So if you're buying 100 rupee worth of things, MDR is typically 2%, 1%, or around 3%. Depends on the card. Sometimes MasterCard, Visa, American Express, they have different rates. So if you are
Hmm.
using that, basically sometimes the cost is coming to the business also, because they need to keep the prices same. Sometimes the
Hmm.
price of that MDR gets passed on to you in terms of convenience charges, where if you're making cash payment, you get a certain cash discount. But UPI really, scaled really fast when it launched in 2016. A lot of people started using it for P2P payments and merchant payments, and it was a zero MDR way. Basically, it was a cash equivalent of making payments online. People really wanted to do it really fast and no hassle. Um, there were other things like MarTech platforms, like Tech, where you could manage consumer queries and customer post-sales customer experiences using Zendesk or Salesforce. So all these things, five, six
Hmm.
things, enabled the evolution of the overall ecosystem, which enabled e-commerce growth story around 2015,
Hmm.
2016, I would say.
So basically, what I got from your initial thoughts is that uh, internet was already there, but the problem was that infrastructure or the ecosystem was not there, which I don't know how, but everything came together somewhere around 2015 and 2016, right? And
Yeah.
I believe the initial or in that particular period, what people were doing was solving for affordability and accessibility, right? And as you mentioned, like internet was there, but what Geo I believe enabled was move from website to mobile phones. So
Yeah.
uh, people would go and purchase everything on a website, but now people started like purchasing directly from their mobile phone.
Yeah.
And I also see that a lot of people at that particular point of time wanted to cater to a mass market with a lot of products. So, for example, everyone wanted to be Amazon or Flipkart. Like
Hmm.
they would want to like provide, be it electronics, be it toys, be it skincare, everything at one particular place. So,
Hmm.
is my thought process in the right direction?
Yeah, so I think you're right. There was an inflection point around that era, 2015 to 2020. But I think if you see which people succeeded and which people did not, obviously the smart people in the industry, they realize that they don't want Amazon as a competitor. They would rather have it as an enabler, right? You don't want Flip to be competing with the biggest player there is. So uh, especially D2C brands who were specifically focused on their brands, they used Amazon and Flipkart and these e-commerce platforms to gain visibility instead of competing with them. Um, but if we are talking about marketplaces, right? So we
Mhm.
have a couple of examples here. Nykaa and Purplle are there. These are what is colloquially known as vertical marketplaces. These marketplaces, they just focus on a specific niche product or niche category, and they build their whole product. When I say the product, I mean the entire marketplace from its UI to its CX to the whole experience, customer experience around serving that category, right? So if
Hmm.
we are looking at Amazon, I would say Amazon is built for everything. You can buy a chair there, you can buy a laptop there, you can buy clothes there, right? But uh, it's not built for any one specific category. So it may not be a best platform if you want to sell your apparel, right? It's not optimized for that. So that's where these vertical marketplaces came in.
Mention skincare,
Correct, correct.
got
Right.
it.
You have invested in Purple, and a lot of people have curiosity about Purple versus Nykaa, right? Why Purple is even there as a second player? Because people, all whenever people think beauty or skincare, they think Nykaa, right? Then what trends have Purple picked up, and which led to it becoming a second player or such a huge player, right? I wouldn't even want to call it a second player because I believe their story is completely different, and they would emerge as a, and not would but actually emerging as a huge player in this space.
Hmm. Right. So I think first of all we need to step out of our we all live in our own world. A lot of us are based out of certain regions. So what may be true for us and our subset of people may not be true for all of India. India has around 1.4 billion people. So it's a very wide market with very wide variety of people, right? So speaking of Nykaa versus Purple, they have their own brand propositions. So Nykaa is more focused towards North India. They are more focused towards premium and luxury brands. They are obviously focused on the BPC space overall, and their whole CX and their whole UI is focused towards discovery of the brands they want to promote. Um, Purple is India's, I would say, after Nykaa is the biggest BPC platform in India right now, and they have chosen to focus on their own TG. When I say TG, I mean target group, right? So they are not trying to compete with Nykaa directly. What I think Purple is doing is, so Purple is based around a different geography than Nykaa. Their target customer is based out of South India, is based out of East India, right? And they are focused more on the tier 2 plus, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 towns, where even if they're doing any marketing, right, they are doing marketing in the local vernacular of that particular pin code. So that's the level they operate in. They will make specifically content about a BPC product in Canada or in the language they speak in Assam, or the language they speak in different areas of East India, right? So they are trying to reach that audience. So they are more solving for access and affordability, versus Nykaa is solving for a different thing. Uh, I think in
Got it.
terms of,
So,
yeah,
I would like to like step back a little bit, right? And let's start with how BPC as a whole thing. So by BPC for audience, it's beauty and personal care, right? So
yeah.
how did BPC become such a huge thing in on I would say in a D2C play, right? Could you highlight that more? And let's start with Nykaa because I believe Nykaa came first, right?
Okay, so if you're starting with Nykaa, I'll come to the BBC question after this. So
Mm-hmm.
Nykaa, I think it started by Falguni Nair. She saw white space in the market where there were a lot of people in metro and tier one towns who were wanting for luxury and premium brands, but there was a question of authenticity. There was a question of availability of the stock, access, and price, because back then in 2015 and before that era, you would have to get it imported from Amazon US, or you would have sparse availability across whatever marketplaces were there, generic marketplaces like Flipkart, Amazon. So she solved for that. She directly sourced those brands. She got them on her platform, and she optimized her platform to just for that particular category, right? I think what she also did was so what's Nykaa solving for, right? If you are ordering anything on Nykaa, you want to get it at least as fast as you would get it from Amazon, right? And Amazon, obviously, it operates on Amazon in these generic horizontal marketplaces. They operate on two models. One is the marketplace model. One is the inventory model. In an inventory model, a marketplace keeps its own inventory and controls where the inventory is stocked and controls mostly the fulfillment of it. But in a marketplace model, third party retailers can list their products on Amazon and they can fulfill it on their own, and they can keep the stock on their own, right? It's controlled by them. They're just listing it on an Amazon. So Nykaa, that's why even from its initial days, it only operated on inventory model, because it wanted to control the stock, control the quality and authenticity, and it wanted to control the service quality. And by service quality, I mean how fast it's able to deliver, right? So obviously, in the mid-mile logistics part of it, Nykaa operated its own warehouses. It it needs those to so that it can serve certain geographies in timely manner. But obviously, Nykaa will never go a full-fledged route in terms of managing its own logistics. It will always rely on third-party logistics providers for the last mile part of it, for actually getting it to your doorstep. But so people like specialized people like Nykaa and Purplle might do logistics at a mid-mile level, where they are operating warehouses, they are operating distribution centers, or they are operating reverse pickup centers (RPCs), but they will not do third end mile logistics.
Understood. So I also read something about Nykaa, right? I think Falguni Nair was an investment banker in Kotak, and she used to fly around US, Japan, and she used to see these beautiful stores where a lot of variety and a lot of brands were there. But in India, when she saw there was nothing as such.
Yeah,
Makeup for people in India only meant kajal and lipstick, right? But
yeah.
then she saw that there's a huge gap, and probably that's why she got into this.
So I think we have all
Uh,
heard of a makeup routine, right, Pratyush? Like there's a Korean makeup routine. I think because I've worked briefly in the makeup space also while I was working in PwC.
mhm.
So obviously in the past 5 to 7 years, the subcategories of products even within color cosmetics. When I say color cosmetics, I mean all the makeup and makeup accessories. The subcategories of products have also expanded. The number of things you can sell to a single person has increased. Nykaa has played some role in that, right? And that's why they, even if you look at Nykaa versus Purplle right now, the amount of brands Nykaa keep and the variety of brands Nykaa keep, so it still has the highest number of brands on its platform. And Nykaa, you will find a lot of luxury, a lot of premium brands there also, because that's what its customers want. But if you look at Purplle, right, Purplle is more skewed towards mass market brands. It doesn't want to solve for luxury or premium brands because its customer, when they think of buying any kind of BPC product, they think of Purplle first because they don't have any other option there where they're living in a tier 2 plus towns in South India and in East India.
Got it.
Both companies are
And
solving for that.
any idea why there's a distinction of North India and South India in terms of geography for these players?
Right. So it has to do with again the diversity of India. So if you're talking specifically about color cosmetics, uh, skin tone matters. It
Hmm.
may not be a politically right thing to say, but skin tone, there are different brands which are popular among different skin tones. Northern India have different brighter skin tones. Southern India have darker skin tones, and there is also a thing called undertone. So if you have a bright skin, you may have a yellow undertone or you may have a pinkish undertone. That will depend on historically where your lineage is from, and where your lineage is from will depend most probably on where you're geographically located. For example, if you're located in Kashmir, you may have a pinkish undertone because of your Persian heritage. If you're located in mostly East India, you will have a brighter skin, but you will probably have a yellow skin undertone because your heritage will most probably be from Eastern Asia, right? And that plays in a role in what cosmetic brand is popular in that particular region, because each brand they cater to a specific sub segment, they cater to their own TG. So a certain brand may be popular among different geographies because of that reason.
Got it. This is interesting, man. I mean, you not only find out a white space, which is like BBC, and then you go into the geography and why there's a distinction between geographies and brands. This is amazing, yeah. Hopefully, they do. Uh, so, what do you think? The what did happened to emerge for Zomato to emerge as a food delivery company, right? What's the story there? What's the trend they picked up upon? And also, if you could touch upon, I believe you had an interaction with Swiggy people also. If you could talk about the some distinctions in general sense, if you could.
Yeah, I think it was even in the papers. There was a pre-IPO round being done in Swiggy. A lot of HNI investors and family offices participated in that, and I briefly had a conversation on Swiggy regarding that. Uh, I think in terms of Zomato and how this space came to play, I think it's a pretty well-known story, but I still recap. So in the 2015s, again 2013 to 2017 era, this was a crowded space. There were a lot of players from Food Pandas to Tiny House to Scoot Seas. Obviously, Zomato, Swiggy were there. There was also Uber Eats, Roadrunners, and five more smaller platforms which eventually got shut down or got acquired, right? And obviously helped by some of the factors which helped e-commerce thrive, like better accessibility to data enabled by Geo. The number of food orders, the food volume, order volume grew as time went on, and how Zomato specifically started is, I think they started to solve the problem of discoverability of restaurants. I think they started specifically I think the founder, he was working in a corporate environment and he saw that everyone at back then used to carry pamphlets for each kind of restaurants that would be there in their vicinity, right? I think
Hmm.
it started in 2008 around, and it started as by listing restaurants on its platform, and on its platform you could go and review a restaurant, rate it, look at its photos, and look at its menu. I think that was the prime value proposition for Zomato back then, and then eventually it shifted to booking your table in that restaurant and then ordering food from that restaurant. Around that time, Food Panda, Swiggy, and all these kind of guys also came up around 2013, 2014, 2015 era. So obviously we know now it's a duopoly now between Swiggy and Zomato. But there were several players back then. Uber Eats got acquired. Other players got shut down. But it all came down to
Correct.
execution capability and how well these guys were able to manage the gig workforce, and how, as the gig workforce got created and it got bigger and bigger, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
who got the biggest funding? That also played a role. So I think around 2018, it is a well-known fact, and it was very publicized back then also, that Swiggy, among all the 5 6 players, Swiggy did half of all market orders in terms of food delivery, and it also, I think, was among the top two in terms of the funds it had raised. So back then it was a war of attrition, in my opinion, where which guy could scale the fastest and spend their funding in an efficient manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously consolidation was bound to happen back then.
Got it. So, you mean to say that it's not only picking up on the trend, but faster execution, having finances,
Yeah.
uh, and basically sticking up with the competition, persistence. These couple of things that also contribute a lot to basically emerging one of the bigger players in the subsector, right?
Yeah, so I think one of the metrics that you would track if you were an investor in one of these companies is the number of restaurants that particular platform has covered, right? So Zomato had an edge in that because of the business it was doing before it started doing food delivery. So number of restaurant coverage, the number of pin codes you could cover in terms of where you could serve, right? The delivery, service quality, customer service, delivery cost, everything. You have to be the best to scale up really fast and acquire more and more customer. Um, yeah.
Correct, correct. So similarly, at that particular time, I think a lot of people in 2015 or 2013 afterwards, because of emerging of IT companies, right, shifted to metro cities, and a lot of white space were there with respect to rental stays, right? People started aggregating that and started a business. Nestaway, I myself have stayed in a Nestaway home, right? So I could see that, uh, but it didn't emerge much. After that, right now the hostler is there, right, for backpackers and people.
Yeah.
So I think as situation change, as trends change and consumer preference change, these people need to pivot their business model to serve the new customers.
Speaking
Interesting,
of
interesting.
real estate tech and companies like Nestaway,
Mm-hmm.
what we have seen is these companies were initially started as a marketplace where they wanted to be asset light. They wanted just to aggregate on the demand and supply, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously there is a lot of complexity and trust involved, and I think none of the companies ever fully solved for the trust part of it. And eventually, to grow further, they had to go into an inventory model where they started keeping, maintaining, and basically listing their own properties as a sustainable way to grow their business. So they had to pivot because they could not solve for trust fully like an e-commerce platform in real
Correct,
estate.
correct. So similarly, other postal providers also took that part and basically acquired the whole property and then managed it like a Oyo.
But Pratyush, speaking of Swiggy versus Zomato, there is one more
Mhm.
trend, that we have seen in the last 10 years. So if you look at the timeline, Swiggy by 2018 was, I think, the market leader in terms of food delivery. But we know
Mhm.
for now, because Zomato is listed, that Zomato is doing more order volumes for food delivery. Um, and during COVID also we saw both Swiggy and Zomato doing grocery deliveries. They had their own thing which they propped up overnight, where during COVID lockdowns you can order from them, right, and get groceries delivered. And after the lockdowns ended, I think Zomato shut down their grocery division. Swiggy rebranded it a couple of times, and in a year or so, they were trying to scale up Instamart further, right?
Mhm.
Um, Zomato ended up acquiring Grofers. So what
Correct.
Zomato did, Zomato was doing grocery in 2020 during the lockdowns. Then it shut down that grocery business, and then it started it again by acquiring Grofers. So Grofers was an old, existing player. They were quite there in the 2010s. They were a significant player in terms of grocery delivery. One of the first ones in India to do it, and I think they had quite a good penetration in Delhi, in the NCR
Hmm.
region. And one, you require two things. I think the most two important things in quick commerce, what we call now quick commerce and grocery delivery, is a number of dark stores you have. A dark store is a real physical infrastructure you need as a quick commerce player.
Hmm.
Unlike food delivery, because food delivery is point to point. It's from restaurant to your home and restaurant to your home. You don't need any underlying fixed cost infrastructure, right? But for grocery delivery, you need dark store because dark store only serves a certain area around its radius. So Zomato gained an upper hand by doing that acquisition because first it solved for the infrastructure, instantly gained all of Grover's dark stores. Second, what you need in quick commerce is assortment. So if I'm talking about Mumbai, we have different areas in Mumbai. There are well-to-do areas. There are more suburban areas where more working population lives. And obviously, the kinds of brands and the prices at which those brands are selling, they would be different in both those areas. So, for example, if talking about Bandra versus somewhere like Borivali, if you are even buying a bread in Bandra, you will get a different assortment of breads and brands. And if you're buying bread in Borivali on Instamart or Blinkit, you will get a different assortment. So you really need to solve for the assortment, what will sell, what will not sell, because you have a limited shelf space even in your dark store, right? So this all for the assortment know-how for a large portion of the entire market, which was the NCR market. Zomato solved for that by acquiring Grofers, and we now know that Zomato's Blinkit, their grocery quick commerce business, is the biggest in India right now in terms of the order volumes they
Yeah.
are doing, and also in terms of the dark stores they have. So we have seen it two times where Zomato has overtaken its competitors.
Amazing. So again, like the same points come that it all comes down to execution. You might have the best idea, or you might have thought the idea much more before, but execution and faster execution is something that precedes everything.
Someone with
Interesting.
smart execution comes along and does it better than you and becomes bigger than you.
Yeah. I think we have a question from Madhura. She's saying, do you think the trend of Quickcom trying to compete with e-commerce in terms of product variety is sustainable and feasible?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question, Amandra. So what I have been talking to a lot of e-commerce companies and logistics companies and quick commerce players. The opinion in the industry about this is the industry overall, both e-commerce and quick commerce, is moving towards faster deliveries. Right? Everyone wants faster deliveries. They want convenience. They want cheaper deliveries, speedier deliveries. I think there will always be certain categories of consumer goods that you as a consumer would want in like within a few minutes or within a few hours. Those would be served by quick commerce, but there would always be certain categories of consumer goods, like for example if you want to buy a laptop, right, those kind of consumer goods, or any kind of furniture, you will be fine with waiting for it for a day or waiting for it for the end of the day. And I think the two biggest e-commerce players in India, Flipkart and Amazon, both are moving towards same day or the next day deliveries. And in the end, it is a consensus, and I firmly believe so also, that all the e-commerce companies will eventually be logistics companies because that is the USP that they will solve for and make them a winner. So e-commerce companies will tend to move towards faster one-day deliveries or same-day deliveries. Quick commerce will always be there, but it will not be able to compete in terms of the price because, see, in the short term, I know in ET there are news articles that quick commerce, even among grocery product categories, they have matched e-commerce prices. So these guys did a survey analysis for different quantities of atta and staple goods. But in the long term, you will always pay a premium for convenience. You will always pay a premium for getting something in 10 to 15 or 20 minutes versus getting it in a few hours or getting it at the end of the day. So a differentiation will form between certain categories which excel in quick commerce and certain categories which excel in e-commerce, and e-commerce will always be there for those categories.
Yeah, I think a lot of people at this particular point has opinions about how Qcom would move along, right? A lot of people had opinions about the same a couple of years back, which was completely opposite. Uh, but wait, Qcom is something which is very interesting right now, right? I would like to cover that in detail in the next episode, which would be on upcoming trends, right?
Yeah.
So, getting back to our pre-COVID area, right? Pre-COVID era. So, we talked about two companies and two sectors specifically. Let's move more horizontally. Let's
Yeah.
quickly cover what are the trends that emerged, what sectors emerged, and which companies were able to like tap on it, right?
So I think if you're talking about emerging sectors, especially in the internet business, right? So businesses which are enabled by internet or which grow on the back of the internet, uh, we now by 2020 India had around 100 to 150 million online shoppers. These would be people who would frequently make online purchases, right? But if you see the overall picture, it's not 1.4 billion people. It's still, I think, a small portion of it. So by 2020,
Correct.
we
17,
had,
18%.
yeah, 15, 17, 80%. So we had around 800 plus D2C or internet focused brands by 2020 in India. And there was a clear trend where we could see certain categories of products within the consumer category, product categories, which were excellent for a D2C business or an online business, and there were some commonalities among them. So they had to be have higher enough gross margins, right? First of all. So if you have a high gross margin product, you can obviously go the offline way. You can go to GT or MT, and there would be some channel margins there that you would have to forego. But going directly to the customer, it's not that easy. Even if you're going directly to the customer, if you're selling through Amazon or Flipkart, or if you're selling through your own app or through your own website, there are fulfillment costs to consider. There are marketing costs to consider because you need to drive footfall to your own D2C platform, right? So driving footfall is also costly. So it was very clear that BPC was one of the categories which saw a lot of successful D2C brands. FMCG was one, apparel and accessories was one, electronics was also a place where we saw a lot of brands come up on marketplaces. Home decor and housing accessories was, I think, another category where we saw a lot of online businesses come up. Um, so speaking specifically about, so other than BPC, in FMCG, there were a lot of subcategories also. So in the meat delivery space, we saw Licious, Fresh to Home. These guys basically solved for sourcing, they solved for logistics. So I think Licious initially started as a means to have fresh fish through cold
Mhm.
storage in the internal areas of India where a city did not have access to fresh water sources. So they
Mhm.
started by doing that, but then they obviously serve the whole meat market, right? You can order online and get a standardized quality product. It obviously costs more than if you were to get it at a local shop. So meat is there. Health supplements obviously saw biggest boom because health supplements are very high margin products and they are
Mhm.
very branding driven products. So if you claiming, so there are a lot of brands like Oziva, Fast Enough, Plix,
Correct.
Wellbeing Nutrition. In the traditional segment, there is Herbalife. Everyone knows about Herbalife and Amway, right? So you can obviously, it's an unregulated market. You cannot directly measure the efficacy of your product. It's all um, so the I think the kind of consumers you're getting in health supplements is not very sticky. They may come because of some reason. They may try your products for a few months or for some time, then they may go. So that was one
Correct.
category which saw a lot of brands come up, but I don't think any single brand scaled beyond 1,000 crore or a very big scale. In that health supplement space. We'll come to that reason later. There was
Mhm.
dairy. So dairy is a subscription thing. So it saw people like Milk Basket and Country Delight flourish. Snacks had Soulful, Yoga Bar, Open Secret, the Whole Truth. These kind of brands which got really popular because of their health criteria and health aspect of it during COVID. And some of these brands were able to capitalize on that, on the popularity and go offline because they had that brand pull. Um, Beverages also saw a lot of brands come up like Raw Pressery. In the tea and coffee space, we saw Blue Tokai, Sleepy Owl Coffee, Rage Coffee, Slay Coffee. These brands were pretty popular on Amazon and on Flipkart. And then they started becoming available offline. Blue Tokai obviously went the EBO route and started competing with Starbucks. They opened their own cafe chain all over India, cafe chain. So that's there. Apparel is again another category, apparel and accessories. So accessories would be anything related to apparel like bags, like shoes, right? So this is another very high gross margin area. Uh, and it we saw that in within apparel, most of the brands grew on the backs of platforms. The same thing can be said about electronics. So electronics had both Noise and Leaf. These are the three big brands that come up to my mind. So all these brands in the electronics and apparel space, it was hard to drive traffic on your own website, and even amongst the industry, we didn't see any brand which were doing a large portion of its revenue from its own platform or from its own app. Mostly they
Correct.
were scaling up on the back of Myntra, on the back of
But
Amazon or Flipkart.
you mentioned that these people look for high margins, right? High gross margins. So,
Yeah,
which be it BPC, be it FMCG, be it electronics, starting from boat to Mamaearth and everyone. So, was that a consumer trend that people were moving towards premium products, or premium products became famous because these people targeted high gross margin products?
okay. I think it's there. I have a different way of looking at it. So
Hmm.
all the names that I mentioned, right? Each of these names solve for a specific product market fit. They had their own product market fit. They all of them identified their own white space, which they exploited,
Hmm.
right? And the means of
Hmm.
exploiting that white space really quickly came during the COVID period, which I like to call that COVID period as like a accelerated incubation period, where if you had a decent brand, you had a decent product market fit. Now you could during COVID period, all of these brands they scaled up really fast. They grew multifold, right? And that was partially the reason a lot of D2C brands got a lot of funding during that period, also the 2021-22 period, right? So these brands offered something unique, and they offered it during a time where people had less to do, and they offered it in categories where a lot of incumbents were already there, and it was kind of stale. So if you are talking about BPC, if you're talking about apparel or any kind of snacks, a lot of products were already there in the market, but nothing was being offered which was revolutionary or which was something really different, like really healthy snacks or really trendy clothes or something vegan or natural product focused BPC brand like what Mamaearth did, right? So boat again is something of a case study in itself. Boat solved for it did something which I didn't think was possible. So headphone space, especially less than 5,000 rupees wala headphones, is very commoditized in my opinion. It's hard to build a brand there, but they did it. They built a brand there. They built on top of Amazon and
Correct.
Flipkart.
So you mentioned about Mamaearth, right? Today only I saw Ghazal Alag's video with Akshay Kumar. He has become a superstar now, apparently. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Mamaearth. Everyone knows that Mamaearth worked upon their niche of natural products, right? But would be great to understand what niche they started with exactly, and how did they grow. And I believe Mamaearth is one of the companies or one of the brand that has transitioned from pre-COVID to post-COVID in a manner where they were able to scale more than 1,000 crores, right? In
Yeah.
terms of revenue, which is very difficult for a consumer company.
It's interesting you asked me about Mama. So there is an interesting fact about Mamaearth. There in 2020 there were around I think more than a couple dozen D2C unicorns in the world. Zero coming from India, and Mamaearth was the first one to come from India, and it was a D2C brand which will post a certain valuation benchmark. So it started. So Mamaearth is among a few successful brands who have successfully pivoted from being an online brand to being an omnichannel brand. What I mean by
Mm.
being an omnichannel brand is you are able to sell your product across channels, whether it be any online channel like your own website on Amazon, Flipkart, or a marketplace, or on the general trade, or on the modern trade, or through your own shops like exclusive like EBOs, or you have if you have any kind of franchise shops which are offline. But
Mm.
it's easier said than done. So a lot of brands tried it. Some were able to do it, some were not able to do it. Uh, Mamaearth started as a baby product brand, I think, right? In 2016,
Yeah.
these guys, the two founders, husband-wife founders, they were looking for a natural, toxin-free, chemical-free kind of product in the market, which was not there for their baby. So they started with a few, half a dozen products, and they started selling it on Amazon and on Nykaa and on Flipkart. They started selling it on their marketplace and on their own channels. Obviously they had some kind of product market fit which iterated on their versions, and their products really took off, right? And it took them 4 years to reach a 100 crore mark. You would be surprised, by 2020 they reached the 100 crore mark. So they started in 2016. By 2020 they were doing 100 crore, and all of it was online, right? So we have that narrow slice in 2020. They are doing 100 crore, took them 4 years, 100% online, right? Now, from 2020 to 2021, they grew almost 5x. They grew from 100 crore to around 450 crores. 90 crores they were doing offline in 2021. In 2022, they grew to almost 1,000 crores. So in 2 years, they grew from 100 crores to almost 1,000 crores. They grew 10x. And in
Mm.
2022, they were doing close to 300 crores of offline sales. Now, this is like a first in the industry that these guys did, and I'll tell you what they did. So these guys had their eye on offline pretty early, but it was easier said than done because it's really hard to crack into the GT, into the distribution space, especially for a
Mm.
new brand. Because why would any distributor stock your brand, right? Why would any
Mm.
retailer keep your brand when they already have incumbents, incumbent brands from the likes of Unilever, from the likes of ITC, all these big FMCG giants. But what COVID did for them, COVID, as I said, acted as a accelerated growth incubator for them, and their online business really took off because during COVID there was this psyche of having everything healthy, healthy food, healthy products, right? So their products were became popular really fast. Their online business, as I said, grew from 100 crores to 500 crores, 450 crores, just in 1 year from FY20 to FY2021. And because they started going offline also, so they had a wide 100 plus SKUs by then. They were selling not only to babies, but they were selling to everyone on the pretext of selling to babies' parents, because they saw that the demand was there. So they was now selling to adults also. They were selling to everyone. They had 100 plus SKUs, and obviously they had certain trend defining SKUs like that turmeric face wash or onion wala shampoo,
Correct.
uptan wala. So these were industry first, and credit goes to them for that. Um, but what they did is they selectively went offline pretty early. So जो उनके best seller products थे, जो which we would call champion products or hero products,
Mm.
they started giving them to retailers, to distributors. And obviously if you're giving a hundred amount of stock to a distributor, maybe 20 would sell, 80 would come
Mm.
back, or 80 would expire. So it was pretty tough initially, but because the brand pool was there, the brand pool became so because they were able to grow their brand pretty fast during COVID. And because of the awareness that they had built, the brand pool was automatically coming. They started getting queries from retailers and distributors about the hero products. So they started selling the hero products offline initially. And now what we
Correct.
see now, they are doing close to 2,000 crores in total sales FY24, and 35%, 600 to 700 crores of it is coming purely from offline.
Interesting. So they went from 90 CR of offline to 670 CR in 4 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So they basically wrote the playbook of how to go offline for a D2C brand. Very few people were
Mhm.
able to do it after that because going offline is, again, I said, easier said than done. Even if you know how to write a D2C or a marketplace's algorithm, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to pull off an offline play.
Correct, correct. Also, very interestingly, during the COVID period only, right? I noticed. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I noticed that Mamaearth products, instead of going to a general store, right? Kirana ka dukaan या फिर supermarket, I saw first
Pharmacies,
Mamaearth
man.
product in a pharmacy. So
Yeah.
they took a distribution not from a kirana or general trade, but took a distribution from pharmacy angle, which is so much interesting that I believe, which is why they were able to crack offline
You know,
distribution.
Pratyush, I would term it again of things coming together at the right time. Because I'll give you a background context on this also. So around 2020, 2021 also, there were a lot of organized pharmacies जो grow हो रही थी धीरे धीरे. Online pharmacies थी 1mg, Apollo, right? And these guys
Correct.
were trying to grow their business, and Mamaearth or a lot of the D2C brands found a very good taker in terms of, because they were able to give them higher margins and all that. But I think the organized pharmacies, which we now know these are like franchisee chains, they were the first ones to take on D2C brands offline. And they
Ah,
happened to be around the
interesting.
same time in India.
Correct, correct. I think a COVID push was also a reason for that.
Yeah. And
Great. So,
speaking of going omni-channel, Pratyush, if
Mhm.
you talk about the home decor and household accessories market, right? This was again a market which became quite big pre-COVID because driven by the e-commerce nature. So Wakefit, Pepperfry were there, right? Urban Ladder. These were primarily online companies, and I think it's safe to say I think all of them have been able to go omni-channel. We can now see Wakefit and Pepperfry stores everywhere, even in the
Correct.
metros and tier ones. Wouldn't you agree?
Agreed, agreed. But I feel they also took upon or recognized the consumer trend there. I believe they saw that a lot of millennials or our generation, right? Millennials or even coming Gen Z would be working away from home, and they would have spending capacity or aspiration to have their own home or rented home, right? So
Yeah,
they would want their own furniture, their own bed. So
yeah.
which is why I feel they moved into that space. And I don't think so. I've heard this right from Shantanu from Bombay Shaving Company that
Right.
everyone is right now playing a brand fatigue game, which
Hmm.
is that uh, my father used to use one particular brand, for example, Park Avenue. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't be interested in using the same brand. I would want something new.
Hmm.
So I believe a lot of things in terms of consumer trends also came into play here, right?
Hmm.
So to summarize post-COVID, I think people now have moved from accessibility and affordability to
Hmm.
more of a lifestyle kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
And have moved from just serving a tier one city to moving towards tier two, tier three, solving for that. And
Hmm.
one more thing, and so I touched upon how pre-COVID era, right? A lot of people were trying to provide a lot of things at the same place. For example, Flipkart, Amazon, that I talked about. But now we see that there's a specialization. People take upon a niche depending on the consumer trend, and then build upon from there. So, what shifts do you think has come, especially in consumer segment post-COVID? Like consumer wise, we have talked somewhat, right? But on the business front, what do you think has happened?
Okay, so post COVID, in business wise, there were a lot of learnings for everyone, I think. So,
Mhm.
driven by the fact that during COVID, there were a lot of funding that flowed through to a lot of brands and businesses, but not all of them worked out. Um, Specifically, you are right that it has now become part of our lifestyle. So to order quick commerce, to order uh, certain things online, right? That ordering things from a certain brand or certain marketplace becoming our first instinct for a lot of people. So, of all the categories that I talked about that grew big before COVID, there were some categories where we saw some shift, right, post COVID in terms of some of them didn't grow. So, first of all, let's look at the whole market, right? As I said before, by 2020s there were around 100 million people who were
Mm.
avid online shoppers and who were basically the target group, the TG for all the D2C and online brands and all the any kind of e-commerce business, right? And this
Mhm.
grew a significant amount. So this may have grown to around 200 and 300 million people. It still
Mm.
wasn't a billion people. It wasn't a
Correct.
billion people, right? So certain brands which stayed online, certain brands which didn't go offline or didn't explore other channels, they kind of started to see their growth diminish. They started to see
Mm.
hit the ceiling of the kind of people they could acquire by spending more of the kind of people they could target. And obviously,
Mm.
if we are talking about, for example, nutraceuticals or the health supplement market, if you're targeting, if a brand is targeting me and I'm taking their product and I take their product for 6 months and then I don't come back,
Mm.
obviously they will probably not target me and or they're targeting me again will not be as effective. So a lot of brands started seeing stagnation in terms of growth. Uh, we saw a lot of brands going offline, like I mentioned, Pepperfry, Wakefit, Mamaearth. Those who went offline, those who explored other channels, they continued to grow because online feeds offline and offline feeds online. It becomes a cycle after a certain one. That's what you want to happen. We saw that specifically also within the apparel space. Um, Myntra is a story in itself. You everyone knows that Flipkart acquired Myntra, and we know that Flipkart acquired Myntra because apparel requires a certain kind of optimization in terms of UI, in terms of CX. So if you're, for example, if you want to buy apparel on Flipkart, you can obviously buy on Flipkart, but all the brands will not be there. You will not be able to explore. There would be some discovery which would you would fall short of if you're
Mm.
trying to buy apparel on Amazon. But it will try to Flipkart will try to redirect you to Myntra, and because Myntra is built specifically for you to discover and buy apparel. But what we saw
Correct.
was standalone brands which only grew on the back of a certain marketplace. We saw that the brand pool for that particular brand was not there. Once, for example, a exclusivity with Myntra ended, that brand didn't sustain its scale. Or if that brand, for example, went offline or went to another marketplace, the scale wasn't coming. So apparel, we saw again some kind of ceiling in terms of the brand didn't go offline, they would hit a ceiling, they would hit a roadblock. Um, Also, in the snack space, we saw a lot of consolidation, especially in the FMCG space, right? So post COVID, there were brands which got acquired by incumbents like Unilever, ITC, Marico. All these incumbents they acquired certain brands, and I'll tell you what went wrong or went right with some of these brands, right? So, as for example, HUL acquired a nutraceutical player called Wellbeing Nutrition, and they acquired Oziva, right?
Yeah.
ITC acquired Yoga Bar. Yoga Bar is that
Mm.
healthy bar player, right? So Yoga
Correct.
Bar, I think investors saw that it was not able to scale beyond a point. Just selling it on its own D2C platform, or just selling online, or just selling in specialized gourmet places. So what happens is if you are raising funds, right, from now speaking from an investor point of view, if during COVID period you raised funds and we saw valuations rise to crazy levels in COVID during the COVID period
Correct.
2022, it is a well-known fact. So if you're raising money from private equity or venture capital at a very high valuation and then you are not able to grow, uh, you are bound to face a lot of pressure to either do one of these two things. to provide them an exit, to provide the investors an exit, or to grow, right? But imagine you're a founder, you are in a category, you know for a fact that you will not be able to grow beyond a certain point. You will not become a 1,000 crore brand. You will not ever become a 10,000 crore brand. Then it's wiser to just capitalize on the brand power itself and sell to someone who can actually scale it. So I
Hmm.
think a lot of this story played out a lot of times where we saw, for example, Tata acquired Soulful, right? Marico
Correct.
acquired Beardo, they acquired True Elements, they acquired Plix.
Hmm.
So a lot of these brands, they smartly, I would say, they capitalize on the opportunity when a strategic got interested in the brand, and they went with them in with the promise of that the strategic would use their traditional network and expertise and scale up those brands in their own offline channels.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of students here uh, having a Mukobara bag also. Could
Right.
you like do you have any opinion on Mukobara, how things are playing in on that particular segment?
I think I've been following Mokobaras for quite some time. So I think 4 to 5 years ago, they picked up their first check among its first major checks from Six Sense Venture. Six Sense is a very prominent consumer VC fund,
Hmm.
and Mokobara obviously they have had their own unique proposition. They had that unique design, which now is being copied by everyone. Even Samsonite is making Mokobara like looking bags. Everyone is selling those similar design brands at all different kinds of price points, right? But I
Correct.
think Mokobara has now, because I've seen a lot of Mukobara shops all around malls. I've seen them in high streets. So I would consider it one of those brands which has successfully gone omni-channel. Right? They are not just dependent. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would consider it as a success story as a brand which has successfully penetrated a very niche but a very commoditized space. But
Hmm.
there are certain brands in the bags market like VIP and Samsung and all that, Samsonite and
Correct.
all that. But we hadn't seen a new brand come up in this space. So
Hmm.
they came up and then they stayed there basically as one of the biggest players.
Correct. Correct. So, but do you think they can do this sustainably? Given you mentioned that now everyone is like trying to copy the same kind of new funky or something that serves millennials.
I think this question has two parts. First of all, what we mean by sustainability, right? So when I'm talking about brands which could not scale further, uh, if you're talking about sustainability, that means even if they were spending X amount of money to acquire customers, they were not able to acquire customers, right? Means they could not
Hmm.
sustainably run their businesses in a profitable manner and still grow, right? That's
Correct.
one definition of sustainability. So I think going offline solves for that, because once you have a shop, you don't need to spend any additional or marginal capital on that offline point of sale to generate sales. If you
Hmm.
are supplying to 100 different distributors and those distributors are able to push through your product, you are just
Hmm.
giving them incremental margin on each product they're selling, right? You're not spending like you would as a D2C brand on driving footfall or on performance marketing, right? So sustainability is achieved if you go offline. The second part of the question is um, what you asked. So they have a lot of competitors and they have some copycats and their design is being used by other people. But I
Hmm.
think it comes down to innovation again. Apple can make their iPhone every year, right? And 100 different Chinese companies can make the same features available in different brands, but they
Correct.
need to keep on innovating, keep on coming up with new different categories, and that's how they will stay fresh. That's how people will come to their store front again. So I think a constant need for innovation, especially in a space where your design is your USP. So design can be copied as we have seen. So I think they will need to innovate to stay relevant.
Correct.
10 years from now.
Correct. Correct. And on a different note, you have also invested in BBK, right? Biryani by Kilo.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think that food category is something which is very difficult to crack, right? And especially a lot of people now think that these dark kitchens are done for. So, what was the thesis behind going for BBK?
Okay, so I think in the last 10 years we have seen a lot of cloud kitchens. So
Hmm.
there are different cloud kitchens catering to different kinds of people. So we have certain mass market players like mass fresh menu, boxed. You know, these guys are providing packed lunches or full meals. We have
Hmm.
players in a kitchen like who are doing multiple brand strategy. Like Rebel Foods, they are doing Behrus biryani, they are doing Fasos, they are doing two three different kinds of dessert brands. We have Eat Fit, right? So they are doing healthy, fresh food. They are also doing pizzas. They also have a couple of dessert brands. So Biryani by Kilo is a single brand company. Right? It's not a single brand company. They have 4 5 brands, but it's known for its namesake, which is biryani. And our
Correct.
thesis was driven by the fact that in any year, so Zomato releases this report, right? They have certain facts and figures for the entire year in terms of what thing got sold, what thing didn't get sold. Biryani
Correct.
is the most popular item on Zomato every year.
Hmm.
Biryani is a kind of dish which is a dish in itself is fulfilling. It's a complete meal. It's present everywhere. In South India has its own biryani. Hyderabad has its own biryani, right? North India
Hmm.
has its own biryani. East India has its own biryani. So biryani is a universal dish. It's one of the best seller dish online. It's the most ordered dish online. And biryani by kilo, which we saw, is the biggest pan India brand in India right now. So they are operating at like close to 100 outlets, and we generally like the products. Like me and my entire team, and even amongst my friends, I have people in Hyderabad, I have people in Central India, I have people in Delhi, and all of them can vouch for biryani by kilo. And one of the things that goes for it again is so people like other people. I will not name names. A lot
Hmm.
of how cloud kitchen operates. Cloud kitchen operates on having a central kitchen, right, where you are preparing a lot of in advance, kind of freeze it or you pack it in a certain manner where it can be assembled in the cloud kitchen at the uh, small cloud kitchen which is there near your house, and
Hmm.
it gets assembled, reheated there, and then it gets delivered to your house, right? So what we saw was um, there's a QSR space, right? So Domino's was one of the oldest players in India. They were doing home delivery food before there was Swiggy and Zomato. They were doing home delivery in an old-fashioned traditional sense that you would call them up, you would have a pamphlet, and you would get a pizza delivered in 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So these what BBK Biryani by Kilo. These guys they don't reheat food. They make the food fresh at the end outlet, and because of the nature of their cuisine, biryani, right? It can be
Hmm.
made fresh, and the complexity is not there because there are like 8 to 10 different kinds of biryani, right?
Correct.
So they have their own USP. They serve it in a clay pot. They serve it fresh. You have to wait a little bit more, 45 50 minutes. But I think it's worth it because it's superior to any other biryani you can get from a cloud kitchen, right? So that
Got it.
was the thesis. Because there is a pan India pizza brand, there is a pan India burger brand. That McDonald's there, Domino's is there. There is and there are certain brands which are coming up in the traditional Indian food space, like Punjab Grill is there, Barbecue Nation is listed, right? So there was a white space, biryani, and there was a need for a national pan India brand, which BBK is serving for.
Right. And any idea on how BBK started? Like, why did they choose biryani, or how did they found out that biryani is something that should do? Because we would obviously think that Swiggy and Zomato might have the analytics to figure this out, right? But how come BBK figured this out?
I think I don't remember it exactly, but the general gist of it was the founders. were kind of experts in the food market already. They had worked with other different brands in the food industry, and they saw the white space in biryani, that there was a need for a standardized biryani, and there were a lot of players like Behrus who were doing reheated frozen biryanis like charcoal biryani, charcoal eats. So they came and they saw that we can make a really good biryani, serve it in a pot, in an authentic dum pot, and we can make it fresh, not make it, because I'll tell you, there is a tangible difference. If you get a frozen biryani from a cloud kitchen, right? Once that biryani gets cold, so it becomes a bit chewy, and you can't really reheat it. But it's not the same case with biryani by kilo. In fact, if you buying a biryani from Biryani by Kilo, you'll get a pot, dum pot, and you'll get a chura also. So you can reheat it before opening the
So
dum.
basically, what we covered in this session was pre-COVID. Basically, something which can grow on top of internet, specifically on apps, solving for some white spaces in terms of basically niches. Those
Yeah,
emerged, and post COVID, everyone who was able to basically move into a omni-channel kind of a format,
yeah,
they emerged out, right?
yeah,
And post COVID, I also believe, like, people say that there were a lot of fads, but I think those were not fads. Those were specialized, specific subsectors, but they were not able to scale because they probably didn't take the right strategy to scale it up,
right, right.
right?
Execution. Yes.
Correct. So again, we have, I think, mentioned twice or thrice, execution supersedes everything.
Yeah,
So having a great idea or identifying a trend is not enough. Executing is the primary thing which keeps you going. Uh,
yeah,
great, Amay. I think this was great insight for every one of us. And in the next session, we'll keep you hold, right. We would want to know what's coming up. That would be the most interesting episode for me as well, right? So to
yeah,
understand beyond 2025, what's going to happen, what are the trends. A lot of people want to know about coffee, sneakers, right?
yeah,
A lot of about why a big companies like Bikaji and these people are getting funded.
yeah,
What's there about pet industry? What's your opinion on that? You
yeah,
mentioned everyone going omni-channel, so real estate is something which might get heated up, right? Uh,
yeah.
so it would be great talk to you in the next episode as well.